Hello and welcome. So, we are into our final pillar that we're going to be talking about today, which is the cost optimization pillar. All right. So, these are the design principles that account for the cost optimization pillar, and we will deep dive into each one of them one by one. So, the very first one is adopt a consumption model. But I think that is very evident, saying that okay, maybe an RI savings plan. What is my consumption model? Understand that. But there are two key things that we need to ensure that we do before that. First thing being right sizing it. When I say right size, what does that mean? It is to ensure that your application is not over provisioned or under provisioned. Yes, I am contradicting one point that I mentioned earlier is don't, stop guessing and go and utilize what it is. But while you utilize, then you start getting data and based on which you can switch and adapt to it. That's the beauty. On cloud, you can do that, which is not possible in the traditional world. That's where with a click of a button, you can either scale up or scale down vertically, horizontally, to ensure that you have the right sizing in place, right? Beyond that, the other aspect to take care is scheduling your non-critical resources. Your prod can run 24 by 7, but your dev and your UAT will not run 24 by 7, only during office hours. And if you schedule them to shut down and you use only during, automatically shut it down after office hours and run it only during office hours, you would eventually save up to 40 to 45% of your overall cost on the infrastructure. This is what is the power of it. Once both of this is done, you know what is your commitment and utilization that you want to use for yourself or for the customer or for the project that you're working on. And that's when you start using your savings plan reserved instance options that are available. So the next point that we will talk about is measuring your overall efficiency. So the idea is to measure cost for maintaining workload and measuring business output for the workload. End result, what we want to target is to reduce the overall cost and increase output. That way, it would make more business sense and for you and for the customer, right? So that's essentially what we want to do. We want to ensure your bottom line is low, and your top line is high. By that, I mean that you're able to retrieve more than what you're spending into it, right? So analyze the next aspect is of course, and how can you do achieve the 2 points that we just mentioned is by analyzing and attributing your expenditure. So there are three things that we will talk about, and the first two is about tag and define a structure. Basically, is suggesting that we would uh, tag all our infrastructure to an extent that it would advise whether it's which team working on it or which environment it is, which project it is, and so on and so forth, and then measure it, right? Measure it, and finally, based on the details that you have, define the ownership as to where is the cost center, who's using it, and for how much. This way, you're able to evaluate and suggest whether uh, how you can improve your business output by and reduce your cost. So these are the ways to do it, right? So if you could search the best practices of AWS tagging, just Google it, and you would see a link that would suggest the best practices in the tagging and how you can utilize that better. All right, moving on to our the next two design principles, which is self-explanatory in most sense, which is stop spending money on data center operations. By that, basically, is suggesting that ensure that you can leverage the benefit and the elasticity provided by cloud and reduce your capex and opex cost by optimally utilizing your infrastructure and not having long-term commitments and lock-ins. And again, the other point is use managed services. This way, you help reduce your cost of ownership, uh, and then and hence reduce your total expenditure and improving your business output. So, what are the best practices and their enablers? First is expenditure awareness, and how do you do that? You can use tools like AWS Budgets and Cost Explorer to have a tab on what are your expenditures, and of course, tagging. That's another thing that we could mention to ensure that you could have expenditure awareness. Uh, Enabling your ecosystem to have cost-effective resources, right? You can use savings plan RI, so it's a logical component to it, where you could commit for a certain period for a better cost, or use AWS Trusted Advisor in a way for you to get the right feedback and right input based on the backend KPIs that they are able to monitor for you. Next one is matching supply and demand. As I said, don't guess. At the same time, map it, scale it by auto scaling or scheduling it. So that's one. And optimize over time by right sizing and adopting newer technologies. So, quick summary as to for the cost pillar. Periodical reviews to right size and adopt new technology is very critical so that you are getting better performance at a better cost, and you are improvising from your security aspect as well. Establish your ownership of cost, monitor and analyze them. That way, you are able to track it. And finally, is automate as much as possible and use managed services. This helps reduce your total cost of ownership. So that's a wrap on the 5 pillars that we had to talk about. So hope you gathered the required information. Please feel free to reach out in case of any queries. Thank you for joining in.